Welcome to the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. Today we have Alex Larson from Alex Larson Nutrition with us, and we are going to talk about cramping. We're also going to talk about periodized carbohydrate or polarized carbohydrate intake. I don't know if we coined a new term with that one. But before we do that, Alex, last week I had a question that ruffled some feathers. You even sent me a DM about this, about like a different perspective.
It took me like a solid 2 minutes to bring up the courage to send it to you, but I basically said I disagree with what you said.
This will be good. This will be good. Carlos sent in a similar question, or I guess about the same topic. He says, "Hey, Coach Jonathan, I just listened to last week's episode on losing weight and maintaining power, and I'd like to get some clarification and brought up another question I have. First, if an athlete is trying to raise their FTP, don't they need to eat more? And if they are hoping to create a calorie deficit with their higher power, won't that be negated by eating more? Which brings me to my next question. I've always thought of raising your FTP from a weightlifting perspective, like raising your 1-rep max. In order to do this, you need to bulk first. Is this the case for cyclists wanting to raise their FTP? So I'm going to give some context first. Last week, we were talking about how to, like the trade-off of like, how do I raise my power and then at the same time lose weight at the same time? So that was the context that we were talking about. And I said that just focus on raising your FTP and then things get taken care of. Alex, your thoughts on that? And then we can go from here.
Well, obviously you're going to still focus on the training, and that's what TrainerRoad is for. And I'm back on using TrainerRoad for the winter, and I'm excited to continue to work on that. But when I listened to your response in the previous episode, my first thought was like, some people just don't have that luxury of having the time to train more, but they do have the opportunity to make some really simple changes in their nutrition that can really help with optimizing body composition. And my team and I, over the past couple of years, we've really refined our process in helping athletes maintain that FTP, if not see it continue to climb, while also bringing their weight down in a nice, slow, and progressive manner. And we want it to be slow because we want it to be mainly that excess body fat and maintain the muscle and strength. So yes, we do have our athletes go at a bit of a calorie deficit. And this is hard for me to explain because it's really difficult for me to give like blanket advice on podcasts and whatnot, because every single athlete that we work with, we take a very individualized approach and we monitor them throughout the whole process so that we are doing this in the most healthiest way possible. So as you're listening, like I'm not going to give some like silver bullet piece of advice that's going to help everyone rapidly increase their power to weight ratio and see like the weight fall off. Like it does take some work and practice and refinement throughout our process. But how we go about doing that is we will calculate an athlete's needs calorie-wise. We'll set some baseline calorie targets, and we'll put them at like anywhere from a 300 to 500 calorie deficit. Definitely no more than 500. That's for sure our kind of limit there. And we will have them focus on like breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, and staying in that baseline needs. And then anything that they take in on the bike or in their workouts, we don't count that towards their baseline calories and carbs. And we keep it separate. And when we explain this to athletes, like, hey, anything you take on the bike, it's not going to count towards these targets. And the like light bulb that goes off in their head, they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, we're going to keep it separate. And it does a couple different things when we do that. One, it has them fuel their workouts really, really well. Even if it's like a zone 2 easy effort workout, I'm like, no, I still want you to fuel that really well.
Yes.
So that they get really good performance out of all of their training. They feel really great. They're not going into the rest of the day into this massive calorie deficit and they're trying to play catch up. It does so many good things when you fuel every single workout really, really well. Because I think some athletes are like, oh, I'm going to do this easy zone 2 2-hour ride and I'm not going to fuel it well because I want to really burn lots of fat during this workout. And I'm like, yeah, but that's going to come back and bite you in the butt because you're going to have like sugar cravings later on that evening. And so when we fuel the workouts well, that's where we maintain FTP, if not see it improve. And then the rest of the day in breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks is where we can optimize you recovering really well from said workout, regulating your appetite, and helping see that body composition improve. So I will say the number one biggest trend that we see from our cyclist athletes in improving body composition is timing of nutrition. I think so many people are focused on having like the most healthiest foods all day long and thinking like, oh, if I just eat these foods, I'm going to lose weight. But for me, it's a lot about timing is just as important. So looking at
Mm.
breakfast, if you work out right away in the morning, having a like almost borderline too big of a breakfast where you're like, I can barely get all of this food in. There's something really special about front loading your nutrition, having a really large size breakfast where you're almost getting like, let's say 40, 50 grams of protein in, like post rut, and like getting a really big head start. It regulates your appetite throughout the rest of the day. You're getting a really good start on protein so that you're not having to eat a massive dinner in the evening to try and catch back up on meeting your protein needs. And you don't have as much sweet cravings. And then you can get through the rest of the morning not having to graze and snack. You have your lunch, again, a really good sized lunch, and then maybe a mid-afternoon snack because a lot of people will eat lunch around like 12, 1 o'clock, and then they won't have dinner until like 6, 6:37. So that really big, long time span, it's really hard to go that long without eating. So having a mid-afternoon snack and then having just a normal, reasonable sized dinner, not a massive meal. I've certainly seen plenty of athletes who will hardly eat anything all day and then they'll eat like 1,200 calories at dinner.
Yeah.
And like making that swap for them is just revolutionary. And then they're like, see that weight just like tick down like almost a pound a week, kind of like
Mhm.
consistency. And then they are so satisfied in the evening, they don't even have like a bedtime snack. They're not grazing, they're not fighting these sweets cravings, and they just go to bed and have a really great sleep because their body's not still having to like digest all of this massive meal that they ate at dinner and at bedtime snack.
Yeah. This is all like what Alex is talking about here. This is the right way to go about it, right? Um, what we see from the athletes that don't or that aren't working with somebody like Alex, that are trying their best, is they view it from a very simple binary perspective. I need to raise my power and I need to drop my weight. But what they really focus on is they're like, raising my power is hard. But if
Mhm.
I could drop some pounds, everyone usually has this feeling that like I could drop a few pounds. So what they look to is this mechanism of a caloric deficit to make that happen. And I think that many times it's just boiled down to a simple like I need to finish the day X calories less than in terms of what I burned. And while in the end, I guess you could say it boils down to that. I think that just what you just shared right there, Alex, is there's a whole lot more nuance to how you go about it and make that sustainable and make it something
Mhm.
that you can actually carry on. And what we see from our side is the athletes, again, not working with somebody like Alex, they will try to lose weight. And the way that they'll try to lose weight is making that caloric deficit happen, and they do it in the worst ways. They'll not fuel their rides. And then on top of that, what they'll do is they'll probably skip meals after riding or skip meals before riding. And then if you just fast forward the time period, many times it doesn't take more than a week. And suddenly you see failed workouts popping up. And suddenly you see them not being able to stick to the plan. And then everything starts to fall apart. Their life is probably also like feeling like it falls apart a bit, like just average everyday life. Uh, and there's something that's really misunderstood about a caloric deficit that I think that not enough cyclists understand. And I hope I can articulate it better this week than I did last week. Uh, Calorie burn is not related to effort. That is so important. Like, and this is why you can do housework all day and feel completely exhausted, but you didn't burn nearly as many calories as if you went and did a 2-hour ride. Like when you are on the bike, you can produce so much work. Like your body, that is a very effective medium for your body to be able to produce work. To produce work, it needs to burn calories. That's how that's how it operates. But if you're tired because you were standing all day at the soccer game and cheering, and then you mow the lawn and you had like a normal Saturday, let's just say, where you're just always on your feet moving around, it's not a lot of work you're producing, but it is fatigue inducing. And I think that a lot of athletes misunderstand the two. what you need to think of as an athlete is that when you can raise your threshold, you raise the amount of work you can do, thusly the calories that you burn. And this is something where athletes simply think that to incur a caloric deficit, I need to starve myself and skip meals and not fuel on the bike. And I'm always erring on the side of fuel yourself, give yourself everything that you need, and instead just focus on raising your power. And if you raise that power, you're going to be burning more calories. And it's probably going to be a more sustainable approach if you're not going to work with somebody like Alex, if you're not going to, have something that's a really solid plan in place where you're going to have a person checking in on you and helping you through it. It's probably a bit more of a reliable choice than just trying to starve yourself and then hope that you can manage a caloric deficit. Now, raising FTP is hard. Like you said, not everybody has all the time in the world to train. But I also see a lot of athletes, the majority of athletes, they aren't doing everything that they can to raise their threshold. And it doesn't require like training like a professional cyclist. It just usually requires saying no. And it says no, it's you saying no to that extra group ride that you want to do with your friends that happens before or after a workout. It's probably going to involve you saying no to just doing an unstructured ride and saying yes to doing one when it should be structured. And it probably involves you saying no on rest days and riding easy or just not riding at all when your plan calls for it. And if you do that, it enables you to work so much harder on the hard days that you get way more benefit. Because this is this is very tangential here, but the whole point of training is that you send a strong enough stimulus to your body that whoa, I need to adapt and become stronger so I don't have to go through that experience again. That's what you're doing with training. You're dosing your body with a calculated amount of strain that is just above your current capabilities. It sends that stimulus, then your body says, I got the memo, I'm going to adapt, I'm going to get stronger, so then that way next time it isn't as hard. And that's what you're trying to do. If you are filling in the negative space of your training plan with noise, then you can never raise the signal high enough on the important days to actually get a strong enough stimulus to get the adaptations that you want. The higher the signal, within reason, the stronger the stimulus, the stronger the the larger the adaptation you can make. So this is like the tricky thing is when you starve yourself and you just deprive yourself. Not at all like what Alex is saying. That's a very measured approach. When you just take the ad hoc approach of, I'm just going to not fuel on the bike, I'm just going to not do this, it limits your ability to train hard, and you need to train hard to such a degree that it just makes it almost impossible to get the gains that you're capable of. So yeah, I think I guess my point is they don't look at the other side of the equation of okay, how do I burn more calories instead of how do I starve myself from more calories?
Well, okay. So when you were talking about the yard work and all of that, again, I kind of disagree a little bit with you because I have had athletes where they have a desk job and they are sitting all day long and the only activity they get is maybe that hour or 90-minute ride that they got in that morning. And so if that's the case, we need to be strategic with nutrition, but also it's I need you to get up and move throughout the day. I need you to, sometimes we will set a step goal and say, I just need you to be getting some movement in because that type of thing, yes, it does burn some calories and it can be helpful for bringing that body composition down as well. So we've had athletes that, I can think of this is kind of an extreme case where I had a triathlete that worked at a grocery store and he said, I get 15,000 steps in just in my day of work alone. And so we had to kind of account for that when calculating his needs of just how active he is. Whereas when you have someone that gets maybe 2,000 calories in, or 2,000 steps in the day at a desk job and they're hardly moving at all, that makes a difference. So yes, you're not burning maybe as many calories doing yard work for a couple hours outside, but you're still burning some calories and you're getting that movement in, and it's really important to account for that as well in part of your body composition goals.
Yeah, there's and this is non-scientific, so please don't confuse me for trying to be scientific here, but the smaller activities that you do have a tide raising effect on your calorie burn, and their frequency throughout the day only helps that as well. I mean, if you're walking, like, I think 15,000 steps would probably be somewhere around like 7 miles, maybe,
Yeah,
like, in
that's
for the average person.
yeah.
That's a lot. Like, if you think about like a 7-mile walk, that's a lot of time where you're active. But typically, what they say, like, for the rule of thumb is like walking. This is going to be different depending on your weight, by the way,
Mhm.
because again, it's all like mechanical, right? It's like how much weight you are moving over a specific distance or up a specific distance. That's like that decides how many calories you're burning there, because that's the work you have to do. But I know that, like, I think for me, I've looked into this before, and it's usually about like 100 calories an hour is what I can expect as an additional burn on top of my basal metabolic rate if I'm just walking for an hour.
Mhm.
Um, and it's just I reference this so much, Alex, because it's not understood enough, like how many kilojoules or calories you burn on the bike when you're riding at like low power. If I ride at 100 watts for an hour, I burn 360 calories. And 100 watts is, for most people listening to this podcast, that's either going to be zone like one, or it's going to be something that like doesn't even register to you because it's too far below, right? So,
Mhm.
but that's 360 calories. If I'm riding at something like 150 watts, that's 540 calories. That's like, and we're going to get into this later, but that's like that's a quarter pounder with cheese, like in terms of calories, to like put it in a point of reference for people. And 2 pieces of Domino's pizza, like it's a lot of calories that you burn on the bike really quick. So like for that person, like you're talking about 15,000 steps, like that's the equivalent of riding like 200 watts for an hour, which is nothing to like that. That's a significant amount
Yeah.
for somebody. So you have to factor that in. Um, so I don't, I guess, mean to say that you don't burn any calories, but the calories that you burn on the bike, my gosh, like there's certain activities, like if I go and swim, I hardly burn any calories because I suck so bad at swimming. But like I'm not capable of producing a lot of work, right? Like in
Yeah.
the water when I'm doing that, like I'm not using a lot of force to move myself through. I'm just splashing around like I'm drowning. But for I think that it's like really important to remember the activity you do is going to burn different amounts of calories. And that's one of the powerful things about cycling is just like you can burn so many. For the average person, they can probably burn more calories on the bike than they can running because they probably aren't capable of running and holding a high enough pace at a high calorie burn for a long period of time when you run. Like an hour run is really long for an average person, an extremely long time. But an hour bike ride, it's possible, and they can do that and unless they burn more. So I just think that cyclists don't think enough about like, hey, I really need to incur a caloric deficit. I'm not going to starve myself. I Option number one, go talk to Alex or somebody like Alex.
Yeah.
If you're not going to do that, then like don't starve yourself. Instead, think like, okay, how can I nourish myself, and then how can I make it so that by the end of the day, I have produced 250 calories, like more in terms of like what I burned. And then you have your, 250, whatever, 500 calorie deficit, whatever you want. Like the difference between that is like 20 watts average power, I think. That's roughly going to be somewhere around that like 250 watts. No, I got that wrong. I got that way wrong. Let me do some quick math
Yeah.
so that I can
Well,
figure that out.
you do the math, and I'll just say, like, when you say, like, don't starve yourself, like, don't if you're hungry, I first say, like, let's get curious about why you're hungry at this kind of random time of the day. Like, was your lunch too stingy? Did you not have enough protein at breakfast? Like, for me, when my clients are like, "Oh, I was so hungry during this time of the day," and I'm not usually that hungry. I'm like, "All right, let's get curious. Let's figure like, obviously, I want you to eat if you feel hungry, but then let's look at where in your day we can optimize nutrition so that you're not kind of randomly hungry during these, just
Yes.
weird times of the day. And so, like, how can we really hone in on those meals to support you having a more controlled appetite throughout the day so that you're getting hungry when it's kind of the normal time to eat kind of situation versus like that people are like, "Oh, I just eat, like, little mini meals throughout the day." It's really hard to keep track of all of that and get to the end of the day and being like, "Oh, yeah, I know that I got everything that I needed. I feel really good. I know I was in the ballpark of meeting my protein needs." Like, it's really hard to track that for yourself mentally if you're, like, just kinda grazing versus if you're having, like, your structured meals and your planned snacks, you can feel really confident at the end of the day that you're like, "Yeah, I rocked my nutrition today. I'm really proud of that."
Yeah, it's just like hitting your training plan, right? Like you
Yeah,
have an
exactly.
objective goal and then
Mhm.
you execute it against it and like you
Yes.
can see. Yeah. I was wrong. It's about 50 watts. Now, I'm not saying you have to raise your FTP by 50 watts, but here's the concept that you can think of. If you're following a structured training plan and you're aiming to raise your FTP, your workouts are probably changing from group rides where your average power is probably very low because it's surgy and jumpy, and maybe it's just going out and riding, chasing Strava KOMs, whatever else. When you do structured work, it raises your average power so significantly. Aside from like 30/30s or 15/15s and stuff. But even then, it's probably going to be higher than what you would get otherwise. When you're doing structured work to raise your FTP, seeing like rides that are going to have somewhere around 30, 40, even 50 watts more on terms of average power compared to if you just went noodling, that's really common for a lot of cyclists. So this is why like it transforms, because then every workout suddenly you're burning 250 more calories. That's not insignificant. Makes it so that it's like something you actually have to make sure that you're paying attention to. So yeah, I think that this is a good conversation because it helps us have a more nuanced one. It's much more complicated than just a basic equation because
Yeah.
you can't just run the numbers and subtract and you're good. It's how you go about it is really crucial. Really crucial. You mentioned the timing, then the macro profile out of everything else and how you can distribute those. That's why you do what you do, Alex.
Yeah, and I will say one of the easiest ways to help bring calories down is look at your fat content. It's really easy for athletes,
Yes.
especially if they're so focused on protein, is they will if they have like a half of an avocado and like 2 tablespoons of peanut butter and maybe like um a really like higher fat piece of meat like at dinner, like they're gonna go pretty high in that fat content. And because fat is so calorie dense, it shoots their calories up very easily. So that's one thing that I would say another really common one that I work on with athletes is just being a little bit more mindful about where they're getting their fat intake. And it's like zero point 0.8 to 1 grams of fat per kilo of body weight. So it's not like we're we're doing a really low fat diet, but we're just balancing it with everything and keeping those calories in check. So if you are increasing protein, I would keep an eye on the fat content too, because it adds up really quickly.
So quickly. It's the hardest part about macro tracking for me personally.
Mhm.
It's very different for everybody. But for me personally, it's always keeping down the fat content as I'm trying to drive up protein.
Yeah.
And also there's other things like you'll see a lot of people think that like chips are carbs, like, like that's what they think of when they
Yeah.
think of tortilla chips. And it's like
Yeah.
the amount of fat in them makes it so that
Yeah,
if
they're
you're
they're
trying to hit,
literally deep fried in oil unless they're a baked chip.
yeah, yeah. And when you're trying to hit your carb macro goal and you're going to supplement with chips, like it just drags the fat up so high. It's really tough, which is always funny when somebody's like, yeah, like I need healthy fats. And like, yes, we do need healthy
Yes,
fats, but many
absolutely.
times that's layered on top of layers and layers and layers of unhealthy fats too that we are
Yes.
constantly taking in without even never noticing it. You know what I mean? It's just like in all the stuff that we have all the time. So it's complicated to figure out the nutrition side of
Yeah.
things. And
And my goal is
yeah.
always to simplify it as much as possible, like, because people come in, like, "I'm so confused, I have no idea how to make this work." I'm like, "Let me simplify it for you and make this work for your lifestyle."
For sure. Yeah. And that's why I always try to keep it really simple on like, the 1.8 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Like you said, zero point 0.8 to 1 on the grams of fat per kilogram of body weight. And then on carbs, we're going to get into this a little bit later too, but like, what you want to have there and hopefully give people some guidelines. But man, the art is in the execution of all that and how you actually put it together.
Yeah,
It's complex. So,
yeah, and making it the art is in finding a way to make it sustainable for people so that they can do it long term, and then it's not just like, "Oh, I'm on a diet, and then when I hit my goal weight, I'm gonna go back to my old ways," and that's where that yo-yoing of weight gain, weight loss, and we don't want that. Like, we'd love for people to just be within, like, a nice range consistently, 'cause it's just healthier that way too.
oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well said. Okay, Mason sent in a question. He said, "Hey coaches, next time you have Alex Larson on, can you ask her for the following meal prep ideas? 1, meal for night before a big workout. 2, the meal for the night before a normal training day. And 3, a meal for the night before a recovery day." And then they also ask for 2 quick in quotes, recovery meals for immediately post-workout. Uh, Alex, if you want, we can go like full recipe side, or we can keep it a little bit more simple. You can let us know about resources, but what would you recommend for these?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think when I talk with my clients about their meals and snacks is I want to first of all like honor their typical eating pattern and style. So if like they have cultural foods or whatnot, like I want to make sure that they know they don't have to eat a special diet that is supposed to be like perfection for like, this high level athlete. I always tell them, I'm like, whatever your family is eating, we can make work for what your goals and your needs are. So a lot of times it's a matter of like, okay, let's look at the typical rotational of meals that you have and look at like, okay, how much carbs do they typically offer, protein, healthy fats, fruits and or vegetables, and let's look at like what we can add or modify to your plate to make it more balanced. And so I certainly can offer some meal ideas here today, but all of these can work for any of those categories. You just kind of have to adjust the portion size and maybe like bringing in some things to balance it out. Okay.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense.
So for example, like, my family, I just had tacos last night, so I'm gonna use that as an example. Like, maybe it's Taco Tuesday at your family's house, okay? So, whether you do, like, pork carnitas or ground beef or chicken, whatever your protein is, maybe it's a vegetarian taco and you're doing, like, lots of black beans, and so there you've got, your protein, and then maybe you're doing some mexi rice on the side, and that's gonna be your carbs, right? And then, obviously, if you're gonna do, like, a burrito with like a big burrito-sized tortilla, that's gonna have a good amount of carbs in there, so you might not need to do as much rice on the side. Or if you're gonna just do that, like, that kinda corn chip, that crunchy taco,
Uh-huh.
there's gonna be some carbs in there, also gonna be some fat in there because it's fried, and, looking at your toppings, are you gonna put an avocado in there? Okay, avocado is pretty high in fat, so don't go crazy with the avocado, but you certainly can have some on there, or some lettuce, or some black olives, and, like, maybe you're not getting enough protein just through the meat that's in that taco. What can we add as a side that's gonna be maybe you just add in some extra, um, shredded chicken, on the side just to bump up that protein. Um Thinking through what you're gonna have with your family or your spouse or partner, whoever it is, to balance it out, but looking at the ingredients of that meal and saying, "Okay, I don't have enough protein here, to meet my, like, I need at least 35 grams to kind of keep myself on track for protein at this meal. I'm gonna add in some extra protein." Maybe it's a couple scoops of cottage cheese. That's one of my favorite things to add on the side just because it's, like, literally no prep. I just grab the container from the fridge and plop, however much
Mhm.
cottage cheese I need on the side. Or if I'm having a big workout the next day, I'm like, "Ugh, okay, I'm gonna have some carbs here." I'm gonna up the rice portion, for example. So things like that is how I think about meal prepping and planning is like, what am I feeding my family so that I'm not eating the same exact thing every single night for my kids? Um, and how I'm gonna make it work for my needs.
Having a decoupled meal, like, and what I mean by decoupled meal is that, like, it's not just like everything is packed into one thing that you just ladle it onto a plate or something,
Like a
but being able to.
combination food, like, lasagna
Yes.
would be a good example,
Yes.
where you've
Yep.
got carbs, you've got meat, you've got, like, tomatoes, and sometimes there's veggies in there. So if you have, like, a combination of food, especially like lasagna, usually there's not quite as not enough protein in there.
Mhm.
So I'll serve myself some lasagna, but then I'm also gonna say I'm gonna put a side salad, for some veggies. I'm gonna throw some, leftover chicken on there or maybe some leftover salmon, whatever I have in the fridge, or pantry or freezer that I can add on there to bulk up the protein of my meal. Or let's say I am gonna go for a 3-hour ride the next morning, like, okay, I should probably up my carbs. So I'm gonna have a piece of lasagna, but I'm also maybe gonna, like, toast up some garlic bread or something to go with it. I won't go, like, heavy on the
Mhm.
butter, but just something to up that carbs at that meal. Thinking through what the meal is and how can you adjust it to your needs is how I typically approach it. Or if you're going into a recovery day or maybe you're a recovery week, you don't need to have as many carbs. You can dial down that carb portion more and then up the protein, up the veggies, the micronutrients, and just adjust it as needed.
Mm-hmm.
One of my
Yeah.
favorite meals lately has been this was a while ago, it was like went viral on TikTok and Instagram, was this like salmon sushi bowl. So you
Mm-hmm.
took a bowl of like leftover rice, you heated that up, you flaked up some leftover cooked salmon, and then this gal, she put a little bit of mayo and sriracha, so just did like a sriracha mayo with a little dash of soy sauce in there and mixed that up. She put a little avocado or like some diced cucumber, and then she took those like little nori sheets and just would put that in the nori sheet and eat it kind of like
Mm-hmm.
a deconstructed like sushi roll. And
Yeah.
honestly, God, it takes like less than 10 minutes to put together if you have like the ingredients already kind of left over in your fridge. For me, sometimes I'll just do the smoked salmon that I have in my fridge because I always like to have some smoked salmon on hand at breakfast. So if I'm like have nothing in my fridge to put together a meal, I will do either some like frozen rice that I'll just microwave and then add some of that smoked salmon, a little bit of that sriracha, mayo, soy sauce, and eat something like that. And then I'm like, okay, I got really good quality protein. I've got some carbs, and then I might put some fruit or vegetables like on the side with that.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking through those kind of quick and easy meals when you don't have anything prepped is one of my favorite things, is having that kind of plan B or C in your back pocket.
Yeah. So this is the principle that I'm getting from this is that if you plan meals that allow you to adjust the components with like relative ease, then that makes it so that you can manage the meal before a big workout. That's like you mentioned, that's when you're going to add on that additional bit of carbs, whether that's in the form of rice, pasta, garlic bread, whatever else. That's when you're going to bring in a bit more of that. Then on a normal training day, you might not bring in the extras. And then on a recovery day, that might mean when you go a little bit higher on the veggies and, you keep your protein where it's at, that stuff isn't going to drop, down or anything like that. But might go higher on the veggies in lieu of going heavier on the carbs in situations
Mhm.
like that. Are those the principles that you feel
Yeah,
like
yeah.
help?
For me, a meal is your protein, your carbs, and your fruit and or vegetable. Those micronutrients are really important with fruits and vegetables. I think not enough people consistently get them throughout the day. So if and they add up, it's not like you have to have like 2 cups of broccoli every night to kind of like get your vegetable quota. It can be like throughout the day that adds up so you're not having to eat massive amounts all at one meal. And a lot of times for me, I will batch cook or roast a bunch of vegetables and have that for a few nights
Hmm.
so that I'm like cooking once but eating it a few times, especially because my husband and kids won't eat them. So I kind of, I'm not going to try and like cook small amounts each night for myself, but I will cook something um like in a large quantity and then eat it for a few days too. And I just like if I've got leftover broccoli in the fridge, I'll just add that to my lunch. And I'm like, okay, great. I'm already like getting ahead of my vegetable quota for the day. So thinking through strategically how you can save yourself time and still meet your needs is really important too. But I would say other meal ideas would be like stir fries are really nice for either lunch or dinner. For lunch, a lot of times I will just do leftovers from the night before. I like to kind of overcook a little, like cook
Hmm.
extras at dinner so that I can have them just to reheat for lunch the next day. Breakfast, I find like overnight oats or oatmeal is really nice. I always do like bagel and salmon. That's like my go-to in the morning just for good quality protein with some carbs. And then oftentimes I'll just do a protein shake in the morning just to get that out of the way for the day as well. I like to get a good dose of protein right away at breakfast. I find I
Hmm.
just do better with that.
Yeah, it
So,
makes it a whole lot easier throughout the
yeah,
rest of the day.
bagged salad kits are always almost in my fridge or like some sort of like salad blend that I can just put on the side and then having some leftover like rotisserie chicken. Um, That's another staple in my house. So if I have to like chop up that chicken and make quesadillas, my kids love quesadillas, and so use that chicken that way. Or the other one that's really my husband and I are obsessed with right now is like ramen. Doing like
Hmm.
making some sort of like chicken broth with like the leftover bones from the rotisserie chicken. And then we will do some veggies, any leftover meats that we have in the fridge. And that's like one of our favorite things right now is to make some ramen. I'll do like the soft boiled egg is like the best part.
Hmm.
It's my favorite.
Yeah, yeah. Ramen, especially this time of year. Yeah, ramen's perfect for it. That sushi bowl that you talked about earlier, like a poke bowl style that you have, like it can be so easy to make those. So easy to make those. And also it is good with more than just fish too, as like a disclaimer. Like you can get sesame seeds, like some sort of like sesame seed one that's usually got like some sort of I'm trying to think of one. I could probably like go and check, but
I just use the
um
everything bagel seasoning from
yeah.
Trader Joe's, like because it's got sesame seeds in there and it tastes better. But
Yep.
I have a gravel cycling client right now who I had told him about those salmon rice bowls, and he told me yesterday, he goes, "I've eaten that almost every other night for the past 2
Yeah.
weeks." He's like, "It's
Yeah.
so good and so easy." He's like, "When my wife and I are, like, trying to figure out dinner, we just make that because we're just obsessed with it right now." It's delicious.
You mentioned the bag salad kit and then this sushi bowl concept, and I like getting, Trader Joe's again has these they should pay us for this podcast. They have these like, you can just microwave the rice and it's done, and it doesn't taste like the Uncle Ben's rice that tastes like cardboard. It actually
Mhm.
like tastes like normal rice. Um, you can get these like pre-bags of brown rice or of like a wild rice blend or anything else. You can throw that into the bowl. Throw in, honestly, like almost whatever protein you have. Throw in that everything bagel with sesame on top of there. And then sriracha mayo, like you can get for really cheap, or you can make it and it's really easy. And then all you have to do is throw in like that bag salad kit, like you mentioned, and boom, you've got like something that's going to give you
It
micronutrients.
doesn't
It's
look
going to be easy to
Instagram worthy,
adjust.
but I swear it tastes delicious.
Yep. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's so good. That's a really good tip. On the recovery meal side of things, I'm always hesitant on recovery meals, like, in suggesting those to people because sometimes the meal part gets in the way and makes it too long or complicated, and they don't end up taking in anything. Um, it's always good to like the convenience of a recovery drink directly after your ride, like a shake is really hard to beat, and that's important to have. But these recovery meals, like, you can absolutely get in your nutrients that you need directly after through a meal. That doesn't have to be a blended shake.
Yeah.
Do you
I
do you
f
like
I
anything there?
well, I'm like the opposite of you. I those, like, recovery powder
Uh-huh.
drinks, I find them, like, not appetizing at all. Like, I've tried them, I'm like, I don't know why people love these because I just am not a fan."
Yeah.
To each their own. So, what I would typically do is tell my athlete, "Okay, if you are due to have a meal, let's just have a planned meal."
Uh-huh.
If they're not super hungry after their workout, which is really common because exercise can suppress your appetite, drinking some sort of protein shake or recovery thing just to get you started is great. But then I say within 2 hours, for sure, let's try and fit in a meal. Um, Oftentimes, what I will do for myself and I'll recommend to my clients is like, hey, let's just add your protein shake to your meal. Um, because then you're just getting a really good size recovery meal. You're getting a nice head start on nutrition, and your body's got a lot to work with in helping you bounce back from that workout. So, like, if it's going to be a breakfast, and I was just writing out ideas for a client before this call. So, like, they like to do like a cottage cheese, honey, and berries as kind of like one of their really quick and easy breakfasts. I'm like, great. When you do that, it's about 35 grams of protein. Let's add another 20 grams with the protein shake. So you're at like 55 there. And I think what it was with the fruit and the honey, I think it was about like um 40, 50 grams of carb in there. So I was like, let's add like a banana also on the side too. Get
Uh-huh.
another additional like 15, 20 grams of carb in there. And so that was one idea. Bagel and lox was another one where I was like, okay, let's pair the protein shake with it. Cause sometimes, especially at breakfast, people just can't like have that
Mhm.
whole full meal. They're just like, I can't fit all of that food in the morning. So I'm like, let's just throw the protein shake in there too to kind of round it out and really get you a head start on nutrition. And then at lunch, leftovers work well if you're, again, maybe road mid-morning,
Mhm.
gonna have that lunch. Look for the protein, carbs, and fruit and or vegetable, but then pair that protein shake with it. You can kind of sip that and really get you that head start that you need.
Yeah, this is the one hesitation I had on the things that you mentioned there would be the berries on that side of things post workout. This is this is like a very mechanistic perspective on like berries post workout, but the antioxidants within them can interfere with like cell signaling. Kyle Pfaffenbach talked all about it, and he's like, from a first principles perspective, he said like they aren't bad from a macro profile, they're great. He's like, but from a first principles perspective, like if you can prioritize signaling above all in that post training like window that you have, he's like, just save the berries for later and then like move them in later on because they can interfere with that. And I have implemented that, and it's not like I'm now 5 watts per kilogram or anything. It hasn't completely changed my life, but I do think that like if you are gonna bring something in, that's a good time to maybe do it. The easiest way for me though, like you talked about, is like a parfait sort of a thing post ride. I love so, but I'll throw in other fruit that isn't berries, that isn't going to be high in like antioxidants or anything else. So that might look like banana, like you said, citrus, something like that that isn't going to be as high. And then I throw that in there and just with like some basic granola, and that really helps. That partnered with a recovery shake, like I'm in a pretty good spot. Also, recovery, you mentioned that they taste bad. Most of them do. I agree with that. The Cliff recovery chocolate one, I don't know if it's changed, but that one is usually really good. The one that I've been getting recently is, I'll link to this. It's a terrible name. Dimetize ISO 100 whey protein powder isolate. It's a fudge brownie flavor, and it is amazing. And I take like, it actually like is a protein powder that doesn't taste terrible. It's just a protein powder though. So it only has like 2 grams of carbs. So I make sure that I'm taking in milk with that instead of just water. And you can really taste it too. Like some recovery drinks, I think the Cliff one, you mix it with water and it still tastes like milk chocolatey kind of. This one does not have that at all. You throw in the milk and it transforms the taste profile of this one. And I always use Fairlife's milk.
Yeah.
And I
Fairlife
use like
chocolate
the,
milk is the best.
oh,
Yeah, my
yes.
kids, I don't know, they've just like discovered that, well, they're old enough they can grab it from the top shelf of the fridge, so they've been going through it a little too fast. I'm like, upset about that. But yeah, I use Thorne's whey protein isolate chocolate, and when I pair that with the Fairlife chocolate milk and blend it with ice, it tastes like a Wendy's Frosty.
It's
Like,
amazing.
I'm not exaggerating. Like, so many people are like, I'm a little skeptical, and they'll try it, and they're like, oh my gosh, like you were right, it tastes legit like a Wendy's Frosty. And for those that maybe don't live in the U.S. where they have a Wendy's, it's like a really delicious chocolate milkshake.
American staple. Yeah.
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 If you've had one, you know, like you know,
Yeah.
if you know, you know.
Yes.
But
The Fairlife.
I will disagree that you can include the berries. Like for
Yeah.
me, the nutritional benefits of getting in some fruit post-workout. If you like berries, have the berries. And I think in terms of like micronutrients, making sure you're getting a good leucine content with
Mhm.
either a whey protein isolate or a protein powder, plant-based blend that's got a good leucine content. And that leucine is really important for signaling muscle synthesis. And that to me is like more
Mhm.
important than the potential antioxidant.
Higher up on the chain in terms of
Higher
priorities
up
is
on the
getting
chain.
up
Yeah.
the, yep. Yeah,
Yeah. And if
exactly.
you love
Yeah.
berries, like, have the berries.
Yeah. The worst thing you could do is be like, oh, I'm worried about the signaling interference. So as a result, I'm just not going to take in and fill that area of carbohydrate that I need with the micronutrients that I need, right?
Yeah.
So the Fairlife chocolate milk, when we do have that in our house, because it also disappears at a rapid rate with our kiddos. But when you have that mixed with this, it's incredibly rich.
Yeah.
Big vote though for this is in your, like, you don't just have to have this in a blender bottle. Like Alex mentioned, you can throw in ice and put it in an actual blender and then turn it into something else. And that's like my favorite vote for these post-workout recovery things, is to make an actual like blended shake instead of just a blender bottle. And that's when you have that, and then you throw in something like a PB Fit, is this stuff that's like
Yeah. The
It's
powdered peanut butter.
yeah, it's like dehydrated powdered peanut butter that can be very low in fat content, but
Yes.
still give you a bit of like a peanut buttery flavor. And
Yes.
if I throw this in, I throw in some Fairlife chocolate milk, I throw that in there, then I throw in a banana and I'm doing that chocolate milk. And I'm getting a good amount of calories. I'm getting a really favorable profile between like the protein and then the carbohydrate side. It's relatively low on fat. A lot of the time, the majority of the time, actually, because my kids drank all the delicious chocolate milk, I use just the low fat, like the light blue colored Fairlife.
Mhm.
And then in that case, it's like extremely low fat what I'm getting, comparatively speaking, to the rich, delicious flavor that I have. Like it's
Yeah.
it's low fat that you're getting,
Yeah.
and you can get a chocolate PB Fit, by the way. So it's
Oh,
like
yeah.
it's the peanut butter powder, but it has like a cocoa mixed in, and it doesn't alter the macro profile in any meaningful way. It just gives you like a bit of a chocolatey taste, and that can be a really good thing to throw in. So
The only thing that I will add is I don't like it when athletes use that protein shake as like a meal replacer.
yeah,
Because one, I think there's a benefit to actually eating like food you have to chew. It takes longer to digest. It gives you a good fiber amount. Um, it's more filling and satisfying. I find when you like actually have some food with your protein
food,
shake.
food.
Um,
Yeah.
not to say that it's not food, but like, you know what I mean? Like when you're having like food you actually have to chew.
Yes.
And it gets you in that like it's also like practicing that habitual like sitting down, having a meal that I find is really important for people. Instead of just saying, I'm just gonna make this massive protein shake that's 600 calories and drink this. Um, while that works in a sense, but I think also we need to not use it as a meal replacer. We also have to sit down and have a meal. That's a really important part of the all of the factors that when we look at athletes eating.
Yeah, otherwise it's too easy to go undernourished, I think.
Yeah.
Really easy to do that because that recovery shake kind of like will satiate that hunger signal, and then you'll just find yourself 4 hours later, you haven't eaten anything, and then suddenly you feel like you have to eat a ton, and then you go through the roller coaster. Gets tough to
Yeah.
manage.
I just feel like with liquid nutrition, because it doesn't have to get like broken down in the stomach, like people feel hungry a little bit sooner, even though they had like 700 calories in a shake or a smoothie.
Yeah,
And so I'm like, okay, let's have a small, like a more reasonable size protein shake, where you're getting like 20, 25 grams, maybe 30, but then we're also getting some protein and carbs and fiber and macronutrients from food that you have to chew, like bananas
yeah,
and a yogurt parfait, like those types of things. I think balancing them both together is so much more satisfying.
yeah, completely agree. Good suggestions and principles. Alex, Riley's question: with Matt Beers mentioning on one of your recent episodes that he had taken in upwards of 600 milligrams of caffeine during Big Sugar, I'm left wondering three things. Number one, is that safe? Number two, is an amount that high messing up digestion? And number three, should I increase my typical race intake of 75 milligrams every 2 hours? Alex, and we're gonna put up some charts on screen so people can see these as well. So Rob, our editor, will put them up so you can see them. Uh, I kind of want to go through these, and then at the end, can we talk about the digestion part, Alex? And
Mhm.
like maybe like suggestions or recommendations and practices that you found with athletes with caffeine intake. Because first things first, like, no, it's not safe for most athletes to take that. Matt is also a horse, not a human, so it's a bit different. um, but he is, I don't want to share like his weight and everything else because he hasn't shared that. He shared his power, but I'm not going to share his weight publicly without him doing that. But he isn't. I mean, it's obvious he's such a tall person too. He isn't like a tiny, little athlete like a Keegan or something. So that caffeine intake for a person that has more body mass, they're able to take in more and tolerate more. All that said, there are some like basic guidelines that we want to go through on this, and I want to go through absorption and half-life, and then I want to like make sure that that you get some practical takeaways. I'm going to put up a chart that covers like suggestions for athletes in a couple different scenarios. So first of all, it does matter and depend on how you're taking the caffeine in. But with all that said, caffeine typically peaks in your blood plasma level around like 45 to 75 minutes after you take it in. That does change down to 10 to 15 minutes when you are taking it in through gum or pouches, and it's through like buccal tissue and you're absorbing it through your mouth is what we're talking about there, because it's very quickly entering your bloodstream. It doesn't have to go through the typical digestive process to then enter the bloodstream. Instead, it's just straight through the mouth and it goes very quickly. So with that in mind, but most athletes are probably taking it in through gels and drink mix or bars or whatever else. And in that case, that 45 to 75 minutes rule is an important one to keep in mind. Now, the half-life for that, it's going to stick around in your system for 3 to 5 hours, closer to 3 hours if you're doing it with gum or anything else in your mouth like that, like we talked about, gum or pouches. And then but this also like is heavily dependent on the individual. Like how like genetics also matter here, but also like your habitual use patterns and how used to taking in caffeine you are. That all changes things. So you want to keep that in mind. But here are the implications of that. When you are looking at your carb intake for a race, don't look at just like this basic, like I need to take in X amount by the end of the day. That is not the right way to go about it, because if you do that, again, there's a half-life here and there's an absorption rate. And if you just take this all in at the beginning and you're doing unbound and you take in 600 milligrams before you've started, you're going to have the most horrendous and like catastrophic explosion partway through that race, because you've taken in so much that it's going to get you to the point where, you're gonna pop. You're gonna lose the benefit of the caffeine. Your body really drops downhill after that. So, you also probably don't need to look at it directly like an hourly supplementation thing. Like I need to do 60 grams an hour on carbs or 90 grams an hour on carbs. You probably don't need to look at it directly that way. Also with caffeine, instead, it's like a much more occasional thing that you'll take. So, going to put this in context for people so they can kind of understand. Let's just say that you are looking at it at a per hour side of things. For an athlete and I have 125, 50, 75, and 200 pounds up here so that you can see it on screen. But for an athlete that's 150 pounds or 68 kilograms, if they're taking in like 20 milligrams per hour, which if you think about it, most gels are probably going to be somewhere around 75 milligrams if they have caffeine in there. That's a common amount that you see, 50 or 75. So that's looking at like one gel every 2 to 3 hours that you're taking in, depending on that gel that you have. On the moderate side, you might lift it up to like 41 milligrams per hour. But then again, you're still looking at like a gel every other hour. And then maybe if it's like really high, 68 milligrams an hour. But boy, that would be really, really like you'd be taking in a lot of caffeine, and that would be really tricky for reasons that we'll cover in just a little bit. And what that looks like, I kind of want to give us like some basic guidelines. Like if you have a race that's under 2 hours, you should probably just look at doing like a single dose pre-race, and remember the fact that you are going to have that window of 45 to 75 minutes before it hits your system, and then it should last throughout that event and you should be fine. So you probably, that's probably going to be for somebody that's 150 pounds or 68 kilos again, that's probably going to be somewhere around like 200 milligrams that you're going to take. You could probably up it all the way up to like 400 if you're really going heavy on it. But again, that's probably individually variable. If it's a 2 to 4 hour race, like you'd want to have something that's going to be a pre-race like amount of caffeine that won't be reaching high up to 400, probably lower, like 200. So that's like, I don't know, a cup of really strong coffee or something, or a couple cups, whatever it might be. And then after that, like one top up that you're going to have mid-race through a gel or something. If it's 4 to 6 hours, you'll have that pre-race. And then ideally you do something where it's every other hour, you have a small top up that you take in. And this is where I think the gum gets really helpful, is when you're talking about 4, 5, 6 and above. If you are taking in a gel at hour 4 or 5 of a 6-hour race, and you're taking in that caffeine gel hoping it's going to help you, it's probably not actually going to have the desired effect. And it's probably just going to make you feel really like jittery or great after the race, and then it's going to drop off thereafter. So I really would advocate for taking in gum with that 10 to 15 minute window that it takes to be able to hit it. There's a lot of different types of caffeinated gum or pouches or whatever else you want to use. But I would really advocate for taking in something that's going to make it easier to not have such huge swings and big delays. There's just too much latency with taking it in through your gut, in my opinion. So if you start off with something like gels beforehand or whatever else you have to be able to start off early, that's fine. Then as the day gets longer, I would advocate more and more for that gum that you're going to be taking in. Just note that on those longer races, you will want to make sure that you're taking in smaller amounts of caffeine when you do it occasionally, because if it's a really long race, you can end up taking in so much caffeine that it can really make it difficult for your body to be able to, not only adapt, but there's complications with the response that your body has from a nervous system perspective that are seen. And there's definitely consequences and side effects that can be dangerous from a circulatory perspective with heart rate management and dehydration. It's kind of interesting, with caffeine. Some studies actually have looked into does coffee actually make you dehydrated, or is it just because people drink a little bit of coffee in the morning and then they don't drink water and that sets them up for dehydration later on, which is kind of interesting, that concept that they looked into. And they did find that coffee did have a dehydrating effect, a general one on people, but it wasn't very profound, and that they found that their estimation was that in a lot of studies, it was a more profound effect because they drank that instead of drinking anything else in the morning, and thusly they just drank less. But point is, you can end up dehydrated. It also has an effect on heart rate. It accelerates heart rate, and if your heart is under significant strain through a race, that can even be more challenging. And then also it can have a neuromuscular effects as well on everything from firing patterns to even something that's a bit more severe and affecting your body's ability to function. So there are risks to taking in really high amounts of caffeine, and don't do what Matt does. All that said, in this case, for Riley's question, Alex, how have you seen caffeine affect digestion? Because it absolutely does have a mechanistic effect there, but do you advise athletes in any specific way on caffeine intake and managing their nutrition on the bike?
Yes. So caffeine can be pretty acidic. And for those that have a little bit more sensitive stomach, we will be more strategic with their caffeine intake so they're not taking a huge bolus amount at a time, and kind of put them at an increased risk for having some GI upset. That being said, when I read this question and it was 600 milligrams, that to me, I wasn't too concerned. Again, I don't know Matt's weight or anything, but typically that 3 to 6 milligrams per kilo body weight is where we kind of calculate their caffeine needs. And then also depending on how long their race is going to be, if they're going to be out there for 6-8 hours, then it's okay, how can we be strategic? And usually it's in the second half of the race where they're going to feel more fatigue. And that's the benefit of caffeine, right? It's not necessarily going to improve performance and give you energy, but it gives you this perception that you're not as tired as you actually are. And It should not replace carbs. We obviously still want to make sure that you are fueling the exercise appropriately to maintain performance. But I think from a morale booster, and really giving you that kind of cognitive boost, being strategic and having it more towards the second half of the race to help kind of bring you back to life is where I would look at doing that for the longer races. But like you said, if it's a 2-hour race, have a good portion, more towards the start. Maybe take a caffeinated gel 15-30 minutes before the race start. And then maybe at that 45-minute mark, or half an hour, 45-minute mark, to really give you that extra boost in that last hour would be probably where I would be. If it were someone that we're worried about GI upset, is kind of break it up maybe in 2 batches versus taking a massive amount all at the start.
Yeah. And this is the reason that the 600 was so much for Matt, was because it was a shortened race, only down to 2 hours and 14 minutes, and he still took in that much, which is insane. So
because that race got shortened right before.
That's
started, right. So
tornado risk and everything. And,
so it's in the situation
he was ready for a 5-hour day, right?
Yeah.
And but that just is what it is. This is interesting. Like you mentioned on the acidity side of things, and then how that can affect things like, um, and I think like this is like a common culturally referenced thing also, but it does like increase like gut motility. Like it's going to shuttle things through that gut. And as a result, I almost wonder, Alex. So we all know like gut sloshing,
Mhm.
and gut sloshing. I shouldn't say we all know. Gut sloshing. The concept there is the fact that you have like digestion is affected in an adverse way, where you have stuff that's stuck in your gut and it can't pass through the GI tract in like the normal rate that it would. Common. This happens more commonly when your body is working hard, like when it's riding its bike.
Or if it's
Um,
really hot out, like if your body is having to
yes.
work extra hard because it's trying to also keep your body cool and your heart rate's elevated. Like there's a lot of things going on, and so gut motility can slow way down.
Yeah, I mean, it's all dependent on blood flow, right? And if it's hot and you're working hard, that blood is going to the periphery and it's
Mhm.
working really hard to make your muscles work and to cool your body. So it's like, hey, stomach, I know what you're doing is important, but right now I got more important things to do. And then it makes it so that your gut can get stuck. Now that really happens too if somebody takes like a bacon hand up, or they take like, like something that's going to be like fatty in the gut too,
Yes.
and then that slows it down even more, or like fibrous. And I see that pretty commonly, like people, especially at Fondo and gravel style events, like a lot of the aid stations are better now, but still at some events, you'll see like orange slices and peanut butter and fruit and like apples and like all that. And while that stuff is delicious under normal circumstances, that's like not what you want to take in on the bike, because it's just going to mess up digestion. So, with that in mind, I almost wonder, Alex, if there's like a strategy to taking in caffeine. Hopefully, you have a porta john close to you, like a bathroom of some kind. But like, I almost wonder if you've got gut sloshing, like hammer the caffeine, and maybe that makes things speed up and takes care of it. But I really don't think that that's going to be as likely to make you just like take
I
care
don't
of
know.
gut
Maybe
sloshing.
this is just me, but I find with coffee, people have to go to the bathroom pretty soon after coffee, but if it's like a caffeinated gel or a
Yeah.
hydration mix, they don't notice quite the, like, bowel movement
Hmm.
experience. So for me, I'm like, if you're a habitual coffee drinker in the morning, consume that at least, like, an hour or 2 before a race starts so that it helps move things along bowel-wise. You can take care of business and then go into the race feeling like you don't have to hit the porta-john.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, like, if it's a really hot race and you're working really hard, it's a really challenging course, I would be not taking massive amounts of doses of caffeine, especially later on in the race when your body's kind of in that, like,
Mm.
situation where you're gonna have, like, that decreased blood flow in the gut. Where drinking, like, a hydration mix that's got the, like, smaller doses of caffeine and you're taking that consistently throughout might be a better option versus taking, like, a caffeinated Morton gel that's got 100 milligrams of caffeine in it all at once. So there's some like strategery going on here when you think about like gut tolerance and timing, but also keeping in mind like habitual use. If you like use caffeine all the time, you might not feel that like hit of caffeine, but that doesn't mean that it's not working. Um, and also like how fast of a metabolizer are you? And that's a genetic thing. Like that if you're someone that just metabolizes caffeine really quickly, then you probably could go a little bit above and beyond, which might be why Matt handled it so well, is that he's just a habitual user and he's just a fast metabolizer of caffeine. Or if you're someone where you are really sensitive to caffeine, you could be a little bit more on like the lesser amount and still get that benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. There are 2 points that I wanted to make on this one from items you discussed. Like, number 1, you mentioned caffeine's ability to lower RPE, and I do think that this is I'm not a scientist, so please, but I do think this is probably the more profound effect on a
Mhm.
cyclist, like the more
Yeah.
impactful one. Yes, it does increase blood flow to like the periphery in particular and everything else, and it affects, opens up your capillaries, and that way blood can flow. But that also happens when we just exercise, right? So I wonder if that effect isn't as impactful, and instead it is the RPE side. As a result, I've found personally a connection so I live up at 5,000 feet and my training is 5,000 feet and above. So up to like 7,000, 8,000 feet. And when I go down to sea level, it's very easy for me in a race to overwork or like overreach because suddenly it feels easy to ride, 15% higher power than what I would otherwise. That is like a recipe for a cramp to happen, which is what we're going to talk about really soon here. But that's a recipe for cramping and to like overwork your muscles compared to what they are used to. And as a result, when I go down to sea level, I actually don't take caffeine anymore because I've found that affects it makes the cramps happen even sooner because I can dig myself an even deeper hole because RPE is lower. And then I find myself in a spot where I'm far overpacing my abilities, and it's going to make it so that the race day ends up significantly slower because of the explosion that'll happen later on with cramps and everything else. So that's something to consider, is something you kind of want to test and figure out with, because it really does have that RPE lowering effect. But sometimes you can write checks that you cannot cash. So,
Yeah.
the other side of it too is I really do, we're talking about the dynamics with the gut and everything. And I really do advocate, this is why I advocate for gum, pouches, whatever else that you're going to do. Like taking in caffeine that way allows you to decouple it. And that can be really helpful. Really helpful. And also, like most of the time, caffeine makes your gel or your drink mix taste bad. And
Yeah, I have a hard time with them because it
yeah,
is a little bitter.
the best ones I've found, the cola Never Second one, to me, it doesn't taste like cola at all. It just tastes like zingy and good. And for some reason, that one isn't very strong in the berry flavor, but then they have other flavors that I have that taste are stronger. The Marten one is horrendous in terms of the like caffeine taste is so strong when
It
you
is.
take it. That's all you taste. It's just
Yeah,
bitterness.
I have to chase it with water, like, in order
Yeah,
to get it down. It's not my favorite, but, I will
yeah,
just add the biggest concern, like, when someone said, "Is it safe?" If you have, like, an underlying heart condition, I would very much err on the side of caution with overdoing caffeine because it does raise your heart rate. There is, like, a point where if you take too much, it can really interfere with, like, raising your heart rate too high.
oh yeah,
So that's just one thing, like, if you and for a lot of people, they might not there's an unknown underlying heart condition, and that's concerning too. So, for me, I try not to overdo caffeine during a race just
yeah.
because to me, the risk isn't worth the potential reward.
Yeah, and like the research that I have read has indicated that there is a significant point of diminishing returns. If I
Mhm.
remember correctly, it's usually somewhere around 250 to 300 milligrams of caffeine, like anything beyond that, and they don't see the like additional benefits, additive benefits thereafter. So it's probably just not worth, layering on a ton.
Yeah.
So. Okay, Bobby's question says, "Good morning. This one's going to be a long one. Says, I had a question that might be worth tackling on the podcast. It's regarding a race called the Filthy 50 on October 25th. Then he shared his TrainerRoad account, so we reviewed it. And then we're also I'm going to put up some screenshots so you can see this athlete's actual file and we can look at it on screen, which is cool. So thanks for sharing that, Bobby. If you want us to analyze your file or anything else or your calendar, let us know. And first things first, I just want to say Bobby's training stress chart is beautiful. It's like a work of art. So if you guys see that up on top of the screen, it's very, very good. So good on you, Bobby. Bobby says, last month I had a disappointing experience in a long mountain bike race. I had a long training block leading into it. I ate 10 grams per kilogram of carbs for 2 days before. That's good.
Mhm.
That's a lot of loading that they did right there. That's hard to do. People don't realize that, but
Oh,
that
it's
takes
so hard to do.
that's a lot of effort. So, 10 grams per kilogram of carbs 2 days before the race, consumed 120 grams of carbs per hour during the race, pre-hydrated and hydrated with 1,200 milligrams of sodium per hour. That seems like a lot. But then again, if you got
Per
tested for that, might not be.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And this pre-hydrated side of things we can touch on in a little bit too. And says, had a good warm up, and I made sure to start off mostly moderately. He says, sweet spot with some minor surges to stick with the group on my trail bike. Not a great situation when surrounded by XC bikes. And then they said, but I didn't go into the red at all. And I let people pass me on the climb and stuck to the sub-threshold effort. Big red flag I'm going to put up here. We're going to circle back to that red flag soon. This first couple hours did not feel much of a challenge on my body. Anyway, about 2 hours in, I started to cramp in my quads and inner thighs. I rode through the discomfort, but then I had to put my foot down on some crowded switchbacks, and it was then that my legs began to lock up. On the way back down through the switchbacks, about a half hour later, I had to put a foot down, and my legs began to lock up so badly that I couldn't pedal. I had to get off the bike and sit for a while trying to figure out the best way to push on. Eventually, I was able to get back on the bike, but I could not ride into tempo without cramping. I stopped at aid stations to get pickle juice and more electrolytes, which gave me enough relief to limp to the finish. Obviously, to plan a race so meticulously, only to have cramps ruin the effort is extremely disappointing, and I don't know what else I could have done except one thing. I had a lot of multi-hour days during the summer, but I'm a public school teacher and had to dramatically slash my hours once school started in August. On the podcast, it's been mentioned that you don't have to ride the length of the race to prepare your body for the long effort, as long as the training beforehand is giving enough time of intensity. But does this apply to cramping as well? It does seem that most of my rides were only 2 hours, and it was right around 2 hours that I locked up. Could it be that I needed to spend a few weekends putting in 4-hour rides to prepare my body not to cramp? I had a similar situation for a 7-hour road race on June 21st, but that cramping was mostly due to a poor warm-up and a very hard start. Also, another red flag there. In both situations, however, it was frustrating to put so much time into a long race only to cramp and to not have a good showing. So, they do mention the fact that, like, they say, we don't have a lot of information on cramping, but any support on this would be helpful as I'm planning some races next year. So I want to go through this one fairly quickly here to make sure that we get this one covered. Alex, any red flags that you see with their nutrition before we go into the actual stuff
Well,
on the bike?
I do have some questions. I would assume in October it would be a fairly cooler race.
Yes, Southern California, October. It's probably not extremely hot at this
Yeah.
point, yeah.
So, nutritionally, I feel like he carb loaded, he fueled with enough carbs per hour during the race. Obviously, electrolytes look fine. The one thing is not knowing exactly how much he drank, and how much he was sweating. That's my one area where I'm like, okay, did he replace enough fluids? Because I think a lot of athletes get honed in on the sodium, but it's like,
Mhm.
yes, that's important, but you need to make sure you're getting enough fluids and to also keep yourself from getting too dehydrated. So, 2 hours in and he's cramping already. Like, I don't know if this is necessarily nutrition related. It could be dehydration. It's hard to know for sure.
Yeah, I don't think that my assessment's the same. The 1,200 milligrams of sodium, if it's a cooler day and you're not sweating that much, if you're packing in a bunch of sodium and you're not losing a bunch, then that can affect like your ability to process and
Yeah.
the food that you're taking in.
Yeah.
But I really don't think that was probably the case just 2 hours in.
Yeah.
Instead, I think that it comes down to power. I want to bring up Bobby's power profile here. The power profile shows that his first 2 hours were near his all-time 1 to 2 hour PRs. So this is a great example of a race completely changes RPE in most circumstances. And you feel like it's easy, but it's actually not. Here are the actual numbers on it. For the first hour, it was a 0.9 IF, so 90% of your FTP. And again, that might not seem too crazy. But when we're talking about a race that's going to be, 4 or 5 hours long, that is a recipe for a bad day if you're starting off too hard. But here's the clincher. So again, that first hour, 0.9 IF, 31% of your time, about 20 minutes, was above threshold. So that's 14.6% of your time was at threshold, 8.1 at VO2, and 8.3 in anaerobic and above. But then if you look at the first 2 hours, it doesn't drop off that much. It's 0.85 IF, forgive me, with 29% of their time, about 40 minutes above threshold. And the breakdown is pretty similar. It's 12.7% of your time at threshold or around in that zone, 8.3 at VO2 and 8.1 at anaerobic and above. So this almost certainly is going to set the scene for cramps. Think of this. When we look at and I've looked back at the PRs in this case for Bobby, but when you look at your PRs, you got your 1 hour PR in an all-out 1 hour ride to the top of a mountain. That's what you got it on. I think it was Palomar that you were climbing up. So that's a time when you would expect to see a 1 hour PR. And if you are only, I think in this case, they were 7 watts away from that 1 hour PR, that's tough. Chances are you're going to cramp because you're really close to what that is. And I think, again, it was maybe 12 watts off of his 2 hour PR. It's not far off. So this is almost certainly why that's the case. And this is research backed. I'm going to share a bunch of studies on this, but there was and I'll share reviews and a lot of different things. But the number one predictors are of you having cramps are number one, a history of cramping that you have. That's like your individual susceptibility. And that can go even, they've noticed that genetically, certain individuals are a bit more likely to cramp than others. It also then goes into like the number one thing, it isn't sodium, it isn't anything else like that. It's running faster or riding at a higher intensity than you are trained for. This causes like that localized muscle fatigue, like on these muscles that are doing the most work, and then it makes it so that you just can't do it. So I want to run through what that looks like and why your muscles actually cramp. And I'm going to keep it really simple. Like the primary mechanism here is neuromuscular fatigue. And it's like the whole concept is the fact that you have on one side your muscle spindles. So they're like all the little things that are attaching and working together. That increases as you're starting to become more tired and overloaded. Those things are sending out signals constantly to your nervous system that says, contract, help me contract. And then it contracts the muscles. But then in your tendons, you have what they call Golgi tendons. So, and what these are doing is they're decreasing as you get more fatigued, they decrease their signal that they send, which is relax. So you have your muscles, and as they get more fatigued, they're sending constant signals to say contract, contract, contract. And then on your tendons, you have on the other side, on the Golgi tendons, I should say, you have this other side where they're trying to say relax. When you get more tired, the relax signal goes down and the contract goes up. And then that's when we get locked up. So like this is what causes the spinal motor neurons in your muscles and nerves to make that contract and not let go. And that's why you cramp. In field evidence, they've like looked at a bunch of different evidence in triathlon and ultra marathons, and the people that cramped, the most common cause was they were riding at a higher intensity than they should have, or running at a higher intensity than they should have. That was by far and away the highest cause of cramps. Sodium and hydration did, but they were like secondary modifiers in almost every situation. Heat does exacerbate this because you sweat more and it makes it more complex, but heat is not also like the primary cause. The primary cause is pacing higher than you are capable of. And there are like the temporary relief tools that you can have, like you mentioned, pickle juice or something else. I, for one, think the pickle juice is disgusting and all like the little cramp things.
I second that.
I just carry candied ginger, like put a little piece in your pocket, and that stuff is like really strong. It's much more pleasant flavor profile and it has like the same effect. But here's what to do on the training side to avoid cramps. I know you said ride longer, and that is one way to go about it, but that's a very blunt instrument. I think that there's much more specific ways. And I'm going to try to go as fast as I can here to make sure that we get Alex done in time. Number one, you need to train fatigue resistance, aka durability. And that does not mean you just do a long ride with intervals at the end. That is also a bit of like, that's a specific way, but it's an overgeneralization to say that's the only way to build it. Instead, training fatigue resistance can happen across the entire intensity spectrum. One of the best ways to do it, make your sweet spot work actually sweet spot work instead of threshold. When I look at your rides, Bobby, in this case, a lot of your sweet spot days, you end up riding at threshold, and then you don't end up following the whole interval structure. And the reason that you don't do that is because you're probably tired from riding too much threshold. The point of sweet spot work is that you can accumulate way more time close to your threshold than you could if you were just doing threshold intervals. And that time under tension at that intensity that's very close to your threshold, that sends a very strong signal to build muscular endurance, which is a crucial factor in fatigue resistance that allows your muscles to work at a high amount of intensity and do it under load without any rest and carry that on for a really long time. So make sure you do that. Do your best to minimize coasting and interruptions. I know that's really tough for you because looking at where you train and stuff, this athlete lives in San Diego, and it's like there's a lot of interruptions from just different infrastructure. You could train inside, and that removes all of it. Now, I know I'm saying this is somebody that lives in San Diego, and that sounds insane, but still, it would really help you because a lot of your endurance rides, there's constant little interruptions, and that flies in the face. If you're trying to get these fatigue resistance, muscular endurance adaptations, you want to remove coasting and interruptions because it's crucial to spend all that time under tension and not give your muscles that relief that they want. And that's what sends that strong signal. Also, you just have to pace within your train capacity. Like I know that you felt like you were riding sweet spot and not surging above, but when you look retroactively, it tells a totally different story. And that's really common for most of us. Like you have to avoid early surges near these like PR marks for different durations. Also, really crucial, ride at your preferred cadence. And avoid the extremes of lows and highs. That might not be possible always, depending on the course, but get good gearing so that's possible. And then other like execution ones, just make sure you hydrate wisely. Like Alex said, you should know how much you're just losing in volume and sodium, but then you should also just have a good plan to make sure that you're doing that. But again, training fatigue resistance, you can make your weekend rides a little bit longer. I would step up, honestly, be very cautious with that because usually this athlete is somewhere between 2 to 3 hours on their weekend rides. So I don't think that is actually the difference maker in terms of duration. I just think you could make your training a bit more rock solid to the power targets, which you're great in certain circumstances. But those sweet spot rides in particular, ride at sweet spot. Don't let it drift into threshold. And then just make sure that you do the 3 30-minute intervals that were called for instead of just doing 45 minutes at threshold. You're going to get way more from the 30 minutes at sweet spot in this regard. So hopefully that's a help. I don't think that, and again, this is why athletes cramp, and we saved it for the end on this one, but this is the crucial thing that athletes have to remember is that it's not, everyone points to nutrition a lot of the time, and it could totally be that if you've botched it. But in this case, Bobby did a good job.
Yeah, A+ to Bobby for the carb loading and the carb stirring. Like,
It's good.
no feedback there. Looks great.
Yeah, solid. So this is it. This is the latest research. I'm going to link to all those research papers down below so you can check it out. And hopefully this helps you avoid cramping, focus on sweet spot work, and focus on fatigue resistance. With that said, everybody, if you enjoyed this podcast episode, let us know down below in the YouTube comments. You can go check out Alex Larson Nutrition. I'll link to that down below as well. Follow Alex on Instagram. And then if you want to cover that side of the equation on the performance side of things, Alex can help you out. So with that said, we'll talk to you all next week. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.